Hello, myself Dr. BJD Kalyani, working as Associate Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering of Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. In this video, I will discuss regarding software development process models of object-oriented software engineering. The topic learning outcome is mapped to the course outcome of CO1, which is identify the appropriate process model, approaches and techniques to manage a given software development process. The software process model is basic framework which is used for the development of software application. So every software engineering organization should describe a unique set of framework activities for the software processes it adapts. A software process model is an abstract representation of the development process. So the framework must describe the abstract view of what activities must be carried out for the construction of the software without giving the inner depth details of how they are to be implemented. The model specifies the stages and order of a process. The objectives of the process model describes what tasks to be performed and what is the input and output for each task. For example, take the requirement identification is a task. For that, what is the input and output to carry that requirement identification activity must be specified with the process model. Not only the input output, the pre and post conditions for each task in order to perform, and the flow and sequence of each task must be specified with the help of process model to provide guidance for controlling, coordinating the tasks to achieve the end products and objectives as effectively as possible with the help of process models. Which process model must be adopted is depending upon the project requirement, the project size, the project complexity, the cost of delay, customer involvement, familiarity with technology, project resources. So, depending upon the domain and nature of the project, the process model must be adopted by the software companies. Variety of software development models are available. They are waterfall model, V-shaped model, RAD model, rapid application development model, prototype model, spiral model, the iterative and incremental method, agile development approach. So first we will discuss about what is the waterfall model. So in the waterfall approach, the whole process of software development is divided into separate phases. And in this model, the outcome of one phase is act as input for the next phase sequentially. So the phased activities are carried out in a sequence one after another in waterfall model. It also referred to as linear sequential life cycle model, classic life cycle model, and it is the oldest and traditional method of process model. When to suggest this waterfall model is if the requirements are well understood and very little changes are expected, small to medium sized projects, and the predictable output And regulatory compliance is critical. Client prefers a linear sequential approach. When limited resources are available, then waterfall model is preferred. So when the requirements are frozen, then this method can be used. And the phases of the waterfall model are defining the requirements, software and system design, implementation and unit testing, integration and system testing, operation and maintenance. Here, the activities are carried out in a sequential approach. The output of one phase is fed as input to the next phase. Defining the requirement majorly focusing on the collecting the requirement from the customer, analyzing it with the requirement engineering process for requirement discovery, requirement prioritization, requirement categorization, and documenting these requirements in the SRS. And the SRS is the main output from this phase which can be fed to the system and software design. Here the objectives and scope of the project are well understood. Depending upon that, the UML diagrams, the unified modeling language and various case tools are used to represent visual model of the project. The design document is fed as input to the implementation and unit testing phase. So here the actual source code is developed, and as soon as the small part of the project, which is generally referred as a unit, which is available, it can be tested. After units are tested, they can be integrated. The entire or whole system must be verified, and thoroughly verified system after user acceptance is deployed onto the user site. So the operation and maintenance activities, the re-engineering activity must be carried out in the last phase of the life cycle. So the phases of the waterfall model are: the first phase is requirement gathering and analysis. So all possible requirement of the system to be developed are captured and documented in a requirement specification document. So SRS is the major document which can be the output of the requirement gathering and analysis phase. And when the requirements are frozen, when there is a little change, then this model can be suggested. During the system design, helps in specifying hardware and software requirements and the overall system architecture with variety of UML diagrams like use case diagram, class diagram, collaboration diagram, sequence diagram, state chart diagram. The major features of the project can be modeled with the help of this design document. Next, during implementation phase, the system is first developed in small programs called the units, which are integrated in the next phase. So each unit is developed and tested for against its functionality, which is referred as unit testing. So the requirements are satisfied or not, that can be referred and verified in case of this unit testing. Integration and system testing phase is majorly focusing after all the units are developed in the implementation phase and are integrated into a system after testing of each unit. So thoroughly verified units are integrated in order to form the system. Post integration, the entire system is tested for any faults or failures. The next phase is deployment of a system. Once the functional and non-functional testing is done. So in the functional testing majorly, The regression testing, smoke testing, sanity testing is carried out. The non-functional testing majorly focuses on recovery testing, security testing, and performance testing. After performing these tests, the product is deployed in customer environment or released into the market. The last phase of the life cycle is maintenance. There are some issues which come up in the client environment after deploying the developed project in the client's environment. To fix those issues, patches are released. Also, to enhance the product, some better versions are released. So, the re-engineering process can be used to mitigate these type of errors. So, the maintenance phase majorly focusing on identifying the bugs which are not uncovered, and during after deployment and operational use of the project, those must be fixed with the help of patches, and the forward engineering, reverse engineering activities maybe takes place during this phase. The advantages of waterfall model are: it is a simple and easy understand and use model, easy to manage due to rigidity of the model. Each phase has specific deliverables and review process, and phases are processed and completed one at a time. So it is a purely sequential approach. Works well for smaller projects where requirements are well understood. Well understood milestones, the outputs are clearly defined, which can be served as input for the next phases. So easy to arrange tasks and process, the results are well documented in case of waterfall model. There are a lot of disadvantages in this traditional approach. So no working software is produced until late during the life cycle. It is a sequential approach until fully thoroughly testing the completed process, and it is put into the client's environment at the last phase of the maintenance. Then only the customer can visualize the functionality of the project. High amount of risk and uncertainty, not a good model for complex and object-oriented projects, and it is a poor model for long and ongoing projects. Not suitable for the projects where requirements are at a moderate to high risk of change. When there is a change in requirement which can come after passing to the late phases of the life cycle, like testing and maintenance phase, it is very difficult to accommodate those change of requirement in this development model. So risk and uncertainty is high with this process model. It is difficult to measure the progress within the stages. All these are the disadvantages of waterfall model. The applications of waterfall model are large-scale software development projects, safety critical system like healthcare systems, reservation systems, government and defense projects, projects with well-defined requirements, projects with stable requirements, that waterfall model can be preferred. The next variety of process model is V-shaped model or V and V model. V model is also referred as verification and validation model. So V and V means verification and validation model. So in this phase of software development life cycle, must complete before each phase must complete before the next phase starts. So it follows a sequential design process, same as the waterfall model. Testing of the device is planned in parallel with the corresponding stage of development. So the development and testing activities are carried out simultaneously in the V and V model. The verification means it involves a static analysis method without executing the code. So it is also process of evaluation of product development process to find whether specified requirement is met. So generally the walkthroughs inspections are the basic methods of static analysis of the verification process. The validation involves dynamic analysis method for both the functional and non-functional requirements. Testing is done by executing the code. So validation is the process to classify the software after completion of the development process to determine whether the software meets the customer expectation or requirements. So in the V-shaped model, the development as well as testing is carried out in parallel. So this is the development life cycle. This wing must define the development life cycle, and this part of the V defines the tester's life cycle. The coding is the central part of the V-shaped model. In the V-shaped model, the development life cycle is majorly concentrating on low-level design, high-level design, system requirement specification, business requirement specification. The parallelly tester life cycle can be carried out in the V-shaped model. So as soon as low-level design is carrying out, parallelly the unit testing must be performed. The high-level design completed, the component testing must be performed. System requirement specification, again as system integration testing is carried out. Business requirement specification, again as user acceptance testing must be performed. So the phases of verification process are business requirement analysis. So the product requirements understood from the customer's side. The communication activity majorly performs the gathering of the requirement from the customer. The system design. In this stage, system engineer analyze and interpret the business requirements of the proposed system. The architectural design phase basically concentrate on baseline in selecting the architecture, in that it should understand all, which typically consists of the list of modules, brief functionality of each module, their interface relationships, the dependencies between the modules, database tables, architectural diagrams, technology details. All features must be represented with a set of UML diagrams. The phases of verification are: next phase is the module design. In the module design phase, the system breaks down into the small modules. The detailed design of the modules are specified, which is known as low-level design. As soon as low-level design completed, unit testing is parallelly performed. The coding phase. After designing, the coding phase is started, and based on the requirement, a stable programming language is decided. There are some guidelines and standards for coding. Before checking in the repository, final build is optimized for better performance. All the code goes through many code reviews to check the performance. Unit testing is the validation phase of the V and V-shaped model. So a unit is the smallest entity which can be independently exist. For example, a program module is a unit. Unit testing verifies that smallest entity can function correctly when isolated from the rest of the units. The integration testing is the next phase in the validation cycle. So, the integration testing plans developed during the architectural design phase. These tests verify the groups created and tested independently can coexist and communicate along themselves. Next phase of the validation is the system testing. Unlike unit and integration testing, system test plans are composed by the client's business team. So, system test ensures that expectations from an application developer are met or not. The acceptance testing is the next phase. So, during this, the project is released to the business requirement analysis part, and it includes testing the software product in user atmosphere. Acceptance tests reveal the compatibility problems with different systems, operating systems, browsers, which is available within the user's environment. So when this V and V model can be preferred, when the requirements are well defined and not ambiguous, and the V-shaped model should be used for small and medium-sized projects where requirements are clearly defined and fixed. The V-shaped model should be chosen when sample technical resources are available with essential technical expertise. The advantages of V model is easy to understand. Testing methods like planning, test designing happens well before the coding itself. Why? Because coding and testing are parallelly conducted in the V-shaped model. This saves a lot of time, hence a higher chance of success over the waterfall model. Avoids the downward flow of the defects, works well for small plans where requirements are easily understood. The major disadvantages of this model is very rigid and least flexible, not a good for a complex projects. Software is developed during the implementation stage, so no early prototypes of the software are produced. So if any change happens in the midway of the development, then the test documents along with the requirement documents has to be updated. So what is the basic differences between V model and the waterfall model? In the V model, development and testing phases are run in parallel. But here, testing comes after the development phase is completed. It is purely sequential model in the waterfall. Risks are identified early in the process, but here risks are identified late in the progress. Errors are detected at an early stage, but errors are detected at late stage in the waterfall model. It is more reliable, the V-shaped model, but waterfall model is less reliable. The next process model is RAD model, Rapid Application Development. RAD is a linear sequential software development process model that emphasizes a concise development cycle using an element based on construction approach. If the requirements are well understood and described, the project scope is constrained, then the RAD process enables a development team to create fully functional system within the concise time period. So the quick software process development is possible with the RAD. That's why the name implies rapid application development. The RAD is a concept that products can be developed faster with high quality. The features of the RAD model are gathering the requirements using workshops or focus groups, prototyping early, retrieve user testing of designs, the reuse of the software component, the rigidly placed schedule that refers designed implements to a next product version. So schedules are rigid and are fixed. less formality in reviews and other team communications. The RAD model, here the module 1, module 2, module 3, the incremental approach can be used, and the phases must be business modeling, data modeling, process modeling, application generation, testing and turnover. So for each and every module, these phases must be used. So the phases of the RAD model are business modeling. The information flow among business functions is defined by answering questionnaire like what drives the business process, what data is generated, who generates it, where does this information can go, who processes it, and so on. So the questionnaire and surveys are basic forms of information gathering in the business modeling. In the data modeling, the data collected from business modeling is refined into set of objects that are needed to support the business. The attributes are identified and the relation between these data objects are defined. The process modeling is the information object defined in the data modeling phase are transformed to achieve a data flow necessary to implement a data function. So, the configuration management, the change management is carried out. The application generation, automated tools are used to facilitate construction of the software even they are used in the fourth generation techniques. The case tools are the majorly used for the application generation. During testing and turnover, many of the programming components have already been tested by using the RAD reusability. This reduces the overall testing time, but new parts must be tested. All interfaces must be fully exercised in the RAD. So when to use this RAD model is when the system should need to create the project that modernizes in the short span of time. The time duration must be very little. It can be 2 to 3 months. When the requirements are well known and well understood, this model can be used. When the technical risk is limited, it should be used only if the budget allows the use of automatic code generating tools and multiple team activities are carried out in parallel, so the cost can be high. The advantages of RAD model is this model is flexible for change. Change of requirements can be easily managed in case of RAD model. In this model, changes are adaptable. So the SEM is majorly concentrating to manage the change in requirement. Each phase in the RAD brings highest priority functionality to the customer. It reduces development time. It increases reusability of the features. The disadvantages of RAD model is it required high skilled designer. Well experienced people are generally the team members of the RAD. All application is compatible with the RAD. The smaller projects cannot use for the RAD model. On the high technical risk, it is not suitable. Required user involvement greatly in case of RAD development. The basic difference between the RAD and waterfall model is the name itself here, rapid application development, it is the waterfall model. The risk, so here low risk in the RAD model, but in case of waterfall model, the risk must be high. The team size is great in case of RAD model, and here it can be somewhat middle-sized team or the big team is required for the waterfall model. The change of the requirement is adaptable in case of RAD model but it is very difficult in case of waterfall model. The product delivery, so it can be early and it can be quick delivery. Within short span of time, generally 2 to 3 months, the project must be delivered. But it is a sequential approach in case of waterfall model. Requires, well, in some cases, complex project years together. The waiting time is very less in case of RAD, but in case of waterfall model, it must be high. In some projects, what the technology chosen by the customer can be outdated after the development of the project. That technical risk is high in case of waterfall model. So add text here, but the it can be very risky in case of waterfall model. It is a sequential approach. So here in this video, I discussed about what is the process model, what are variety of process models, and I discussed majorly three process development model. One is the waterfall model, second one is V-shaped model, third one RAD model. And the differences between these models is discussed by taking the baseline model as waterfall software development model, and the references used in this video are these. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.